What's up, guys? It's your boys Wilkie back out with another of the Chris Watts videos to add to our collection of information that hopefully will one day get some closure by finding out that somebody else was involved with Chris, aka NK. But we're going to be watching, which by popular demand, thousands of you guys have been messaging me. I've been watching Behind Criminal Minds, a great YouTube channel. I've watched him for a lot of his other stuff as well, besides the Chris Watts videos. But he's had a series of 3 episodes when it comes to the Chris Watts videos, and I somehow, some way, didn't watch the first one. We watched the second one, we watched the third one, which are beautifully created and made. Watch my reaction towards them, or go over to Behind the Criminal Minds, or Behind Criminal Minds, not the Criminal Minds. Go over there, give him some love, watch his old stuff, watch his new stuff. This man does a fantastic job. He knows the law. He knows everything, like a good amount of stuff when it comes to criminal-ish content. And I will definitely watch this one with you guys because it's been asked about by hundreds of you guys, which is Into the Mind of a Monster, aka Chris Watts. But before we go any further, make sure you guys just subscribe to the YouTube channel by hitting that wiper icon down at the bottom right. Hit that bell icon next to it, so when I do post videos like this one, you guys will get that little ring notification that I posted that video, and then you guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, I thank you guys so very much. We're still continuing on to our hopeful future goal of 100,000 subscribers, but I can't do it without you guys. We're very close to as well the 50,000 subscriber goal, which we will be doing a giveaway, the first giveaway of many, of a MetaQuest 3 virtual reality headset. And all you gotta do is subscribe, comment, like, and share, and hashtag win the giveaway in any Zwolki video. Without further ado, let's get into the first episode. I know this is kind of weird that we watched the second one, then third one, but we're going back to the first one. I don't know how this slipped through the cracks of me not watching this, but the way to figure out, like, how, what, where, when, and why, and if there was a possible accessory to these murders, getting into the mind of this man can do so. He's like I wouldn't say a ticking time bomb, he's like a safe. And we think we know what's going on with this man, but he has stated several times that there's information that he will take to his grave. And getting into his mind and figuring out how this man went from being a loving father and a loving spouse to a complete family annihilator, and figure out what went wrong. I can tell you what went wrong. It's NK. But again, that is my personal opinion. It's educational for purposes only. But with that being said, let's get into the video. Oop, no audio. Good.
The weather was frigid that Monday morning on February 18th, 2019, as officers from state and federal law enforcement made their way to the maximum security prison at the Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. The ominous concrete fortress was an inescapable coffin surrounded by offset rows of chain link fence covered in looped razor wire as far as the eye could see. And just months before, it had become the home of one of the most infamous and reviled criminals of our modern time. Driving up to the Sally Port, the guard checked the driver's credentials and signaled to the corresponding guards that these visitors were approved for entry. In the vehicle that day was Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent Tammy Lee, who had been accompanied by FBI agent Graham Coder.
I think they did a great job.
Frederick Police Department detective Dave Baumhover. Once inside the heavily guarded gates of the prison, they were directed to an entrance where they would check in and wait patiently for the correctional officers preparing their prisoner for transport. But this was no ordinary prisoner. This man was assigned to the highest security level in a prison yard saved only for the most dangerous and violent offenders in the country. But even with the protections of a maximum security yard, this ill-famed convict had to be segregated from the other inmates and placed into protective custody, not because of the fear of what he could do to them, but because of the dark reality of what they would do to him. Moving a high-risk inmate in a maximum security prison yard is no small feat, The correctional officers had to ensure that every space, hall, and entrance was clear of any hazards, especially from other inmates. And this offender required the highest degree of caution
That's
due to the
nuts.
number of ongoing threats against his life, which was the very reason he had been moved from Colorado to.
They almost made it sound like that this man was so bad that it was almost like he did something to the president. Like they're like, oh, we got to put national security lockdown because he did something to the president. This man annihilated his family, which is again very grotesque, disrespectful. Uh, it's ridiculously unheard of, and he's a monster. But like they're on complete lockdown to protect this man, not from him doing wrong to somebody else, but for him to be taking advantage, or not taking advantage of, but getting some type of inmate on him, which is, I'm surprised that he hasn't been hurt yet. But let's continue. Watt's eyes, it's just, it's
The
all
events
scary.
surrounding the Chris Watts case has become a cornerstone in the true crime community. In the years since his arrest and subsequent conviction, there has been a Herculean effort by the.
I'm telling you right now, just from looking at them both, I just, he obviously has a type, but he went after Shanann because he loved the way she looked, she loved the way she was, and he went after her at her lowest. She had lupus, she had all this stuff that was going against her, not many friends at the location that she was at, and he fell in love with Shanann. But then lo and behold, woman on the left comes around and destroys that connection that they had. There is rumors up there that still to this day that if Nicole never came around and sought out after Chris, that Shanann, Bella, Cece, and baby Nico might still be here to this day. But like a lot of us, God has a plan for everybody. Again, I'm not putting my faith or my religious views on anybody. It's just that when God decides that it's time to come home, no matter what, God will take you home. But in this case, it was definitely a horrendous act. But I don't know if it. I still blame Nicole. I still to this day blame Nicole. If it wasn't for her, they might still be here today. But again, you take it with what you will, and let me know in the comments if you think if NK wasn't around, if they would still be here to this day. So let's continue.
Community at large to try and gain a clearer understanding of what happened. But before we begin, I need to first discuss some important details. This channel advocates for victims and their families, and in this case specifically for Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, as well as the Ruschek family. Assigning blame to a victim for causing their own homicide is not something that will ever be promoted on this channel. And in episode 2 of this series, we will examine the evidence concerning allegations against Nicole Kessinger. Rest assured, I will evaluate those details with the same microscope that I have on each and every case that I discuss.
Great episode.
Finally, I am a firm believer in personal responsibility, and that will remain the cornerstone of how I approach content on this channel. With that said, let's begin.
Let's do it.
Most people familiar with this case have seen the interrogation footage that would eventually lead to the arrest of Chris Watts in connection to the deaths of his wife Shanann, her unborn child Nico, and their children Bella and Cece Watts. Watching this heartbreaking tragedy unfold in real time resulted with many of us within the legal community intently observing all of the ongoing developments within this case. Like many of you, we were surprised at how quickly Chris accepted a plea deal, and by the time sentencing had occurred,
which I will be doing a live video tonight about this said reason why it went so fast.
Many of us were left feeling confused by the lack of disclosure from a defendant that seemed to be withholding the full truth. Over the years, the American public has become accustomed to lengthy jury trials, where the facts of the case are litigated in full view of the public, giving talking heads and the media ample time to digest and disseminate each element of the case. But this injustice felt incomplete, and not just to onlookers. Law enforcement also shared that sentiment. And their journey to Chris's maximum security prison was underscored by the singular goal of getting to the truth and obtaining answers. CBI agent Tammy Lee was one of their primary weapons in their pursuit of that disclosure.
I think personally this woman did fantastic. She drilled into this man. There are people that blame Tammy for not doing this and this. Like, I've watched the interrogation. The interrogation that Tammy and Coder do, spot on. But the ones that are done for Nicole, like, you can see the night and day of those different interactions and the different interrogations, or I shouldn't say interrogations, because Nicole was interviewed, not interrogated, where Chris was interviewed, then turned into interrogation, which it should have been the same thing for Nicole. But again, Tammy and Coder did fantastic, I think.
The same woman who had conducted the lie detector test that eventually led to Chris's confession. But if they were going to get the unadulterated and unfiltered truth, they would need to revisit a moment in time that to that point, Chris Watts had successfully obscured. Law enforcement would have to meticulously navigate this moment while maintaining a careful balance so as not to cause Chris to completely shut down and prematurely end their voluntary discussion.
I know I do apologize for stopping, but you guys don't want me to talk during the video, so bear with me. So the thing that kind of is jaw-dropping to me is this man felt that he was going to get away with this. At the soonest slight of being stated that he was guilty, he didn't lawyer up. Shockingly, I don't know why he didn't lawyer up. Nicole, she thought she was, she still thinks she's innocent. She brought her daddy there, but none of them brought lawyers into this until after the fact of him being confessed. Why? That's what another thing. I'm surprised he didn't say, I'd like to speak to my attorney. Like, you're given that option to speak or not speak, and if you don't speak, you needed your attorney present. So, it's definitely peculiar, but Nicole gets her daddy in there.
This would be a true test of their skill, and even armed with years of experience, there was no guarantee that they would leave his prison with anything more than the same story he had already told. From a law enforcement perspective, Chris Watts did not fit the standard profile for the crimes that he had committed. It was suspected that he may represent an entirely new profile of offender, an offender that many of us in the legal community had not seen in years. And if those members of law enforcement had any hope of getting to the truth, they would need him to revisit a place that most offenders refuse to return to. But it was the only way they would obtain what they had lacked from the very beginning.
He does this a lot.
The how and the why. In my research, I believe I have uncovered evidence that I would like to present to you for your consideration.
Yes, please.
Evidence that helps to better explain those factors and hopefully shed light on a man that I believe is not a wolf, but a monster in sheep's clothing. While I don't have the requisite certification to make a clinical determination about Chris Watts' potential mental health disorders,
As we all don't.
we can, however, make informed observations based on the facts.
For educational
And
purposes.
it is my belief that Chris Watts not only premeditated his crimes weeks before they occurred, but there is compelling evidence that supports claims of psychopathy. A popular misconception about psychopaths is that they all share the same clear and definable set of traits, characteristics, and experiences that generally originate from their childhood. One of the most common tropes being that all psychopaths demonstrate cruel behavior towards animals in their adolescence, and that they are all the byproduct of familial cruelty or neglect. However, not all psychopaths are created equal, and this is demonstrated not only in the evidence, but also within the literature on the disorder, which stands in contrast to the aforementioned claims. When we consider the case of Ted Bundy, he stated on numerous occasions that he had a perfectly supportive and normal upbringing.
Let's go back then.
So what snapped?
First of all, you, as I understand it, were raised in what you consider to have been a healthy home.
Absolutely.
You were not physically abused. You were not sexually abused. You were not emotionally abused.
No way. And that's part of the tragedy of this whole situation is because I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. A home where we as children were the focus of my parents' lives, where we regularly attended church, 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke, there was no gambling,
so it's like, what the hell
physical
snapped?
abuse, fighting in the home. I'm not saying this was Leave It to Beaver.
It wasn't a perfect home.
No, I don't know that such a home exists, but it was a fine, solid Christian home, and nobody, I hope no one will try to take the easy way out and to try to blame or otherwise accuse my family of contributing to this, because I know, and I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I know what happened, and I think this is a message I want to get across.
In the years preceding Ted Bundy's vicious crime spree, he maintained a healthy and supportive relationship with his girlfriend of 5 years that also included a loving relationship with her daughter. And neither saw any signs of the diabolical man he would become. Ted Bundy was magnanimous, well-spoken, intelligent, good-looking, and yet he became a monster that would go on to terrorize the lives of countless women, the number of which we still don't know in its entirety to this day. Psychopaths are often misunderstood by the general public, and Ted Bundy is not the only example. Last month, Andrew Gold, an award-winning ex-BBC journalist who hosts a successful platform right here on YouTube, interviewed a clinically diagnosed narcissistic psychopath and exceptional content creator himself, H.G. Tudor. Links to both of their channels will be listed in the description. Their content is in a different genre from mine, but I highly recommend both creators. Last week, I contacted Andrew, and with his permission, I would like to share with you some very important segments of his interview with H.G. Tudor. An interview that helped to provide me with a deeper understanding of psychopaths and how they are created.
So does that imply that it's a genetic thing? Are psychopaths and narcissists made, or do you become one?
Well, a narcissist is made, and there are 2 components to that, Andrew. The first is a genetic predisposition towards being a narcissist. So that has to exist. And then that person has to be subjected to what's known as a lack of control environment. And that could be anything from being physically abused, emotionally not supported, witnessing a terrible and traumatic event, being told that you're fantastic and wonderful at everything when actually you're not. So you grow up in a gilded environment. Lots of different types of lack of control environments.
The first time I heard this interview, I was stunned at this expose.
I'm shocked.
Because it revealed so much that I didn't fully understand about psychopaths.
Me
So
either.
what we've learned is that a lack of control environment, in effect, is a breeding ground for psychopaths, which includes all of the typical tropes we've heard about them in the past, but also includes environments where you're being told that you're perfect and wonderful at everything. And personally, I believe that this is a critical component of Chris Watts' upbringing, but allow me to demonstrate exactly what I mean.
You didn't see things like him getting into
I-
fights.
No.
I don't mean to laugh. I literally thought this exact interview. And lo and behold, Behind Criminal Minds brings this up. Holy crap.
No fighting. He was quiet, and he got along with people, and he didn't start anything, and he was a perfect teenager, tell you the truth. He did not even rebel. He wanted to go to NASCAR Tech. We made that possible for him.
But I wanted to know what the mechanisms were that caused a narcissist or a psychopath to be created. Here's HG's input on the matter.
For the creation of the narcissist, one has the genetic predisposition, the ingredients for the cake, as I often explain, and then the environment, which is like the oven. And you need to be in the oven at a particular temperature for a particular duration of time with those ingredients, and thus narcissism is created.
In reviewing the DSM-5, one of the striking components of the causation of narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, is described as follows. The etiology of narcissistic personality disorder is multifaceted. Some studies have suggested a genetic predisposition to the disorder. In contrast, excessive praise, including the belief that a child may have extraordinary abilities, may also lead to NPD. Simply put, parents who believe and reaffirm to their children that they can do no wrong may play a significant part in the development of these disorders.
There's doubt. I have doubt that he did it. I can't see that he did it. I just cannot see him doing that as much as he loved his girls. How do you do that?
That's
I just
why
don't see it.
That's why for educational purposes only, I think it was Nicole Kessinger. I don't think Chris had the balls to do it to his daughters, so that's why NK helped. But again, I can't say for 100% certainty because we don't have the evidence in front of us, or the evidence that they did collect wasn't used to wean her out as a suspect. It was never used. So how do we know?
I just can't see him doing it.
Now, I want to be clear. This is not about assigning blame to Chris's parents for his behavior or
True.
suggesting that an inferred diagnosis somehow fully explains the motivations of a man who could have committed such heinous crimes. However, these insights do help us gain a deeper understanding of how we got here.
Agreed.
But pay close attention to this next segment from our insightful psychopath, H.G. Tudor.
So, what's the difference between narcissism and psychopathy? And I gather you've got both of these.
Narcissism is narcissistic personality disorder, and psychopathy isn't an actual diagnosis, it's antisocial personality disorder. So there are similarities between the two, but some of the key differences, for example, are that with the psychopath, there is the absence of anxiety. There is the processing of fear is different.
I really didn't see
There is
that.
also the fact that psychopaths can act as loners, whereas narcissists really do need other people.
Psychopaths can act as loners. Interesting.
Which
I
was
didn't
Chris.
see anything that was abnormal about him, except he was socially awkward. You know, he had trouble socializing, but so did I when I was younger.
It's important to remember that not all psychopaths are dangerous. Studies suggest that anywhere from 4 to 12% of CEOs exhibit psychopathic traits.
Wow.
A more recent example, Elon Musk, who is clearly losing it right now,
When
could
did
be
this come out? This came out a year ago. Wow.
said to have these characteristics, but not all psychopaths are inherently unsafe. However, they are known to be driven by internal motivations.
So you could be a So you could be a socio, or my gosh, I can't even say it.
could be said to have these characteristics, but not all psychopaths are.
Psychopath. Sorry, I keep wanting to say psychosis. Psychopaths. This makes total sense because I've been with some girls that felt like psychopaths, but they didn't like. They weren't like bad, but this makes total sense now.
Inherently unsafe. However, they are known to be driven by internal motivations that cause them to manipulate the people around them. But the evidence of Chris Watts' possible psychopathy was just beginning. And the depth of his darkness was about to be put on full display by the very same people who had ensured that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. On the morning of Monday, February 18th, 2019, the interview with Chris Watts and law enforcement agents would begin with insignificant small talk, but wouldn't end for well over 5 hours. And the revelations that Chris would divulge would leave the veteran law enforcement agents stunned and crushed under the weight of his unbridled cruelty.
What were you thinking this whole time? Like,
in the back of my head, I was just telling myself, "What are you doing?" Like, every time, I open up my phone, I could see pictures, like, of my wife and my kids, and just like, what am I doing? And then, like, every time I was with her, it seemed like I didn't think. It seemed like it was like a blinder that was in my face.
Oh.
And it was like every time I look back on it, like, like I have pictures of my wife and kids and myself. And like every night, or every morning, every night, I just, talk to them, say like I have like this book I used to read for CC, and I remember that book, so I read that to them like every night.
It's very important to remember that while Chris is now expressing emotion concerning the disgusting and vile acts he perpetrated against his wife and children, just 9 months ago, this year, Chris participated in an interview where he has stated that he thinks he will eventually leave prison someday. And in the interview, he said that he's ready to leave and has indicated that he is presently working on an appeal that will be predicated on the basis that he was pressured into giving his confession. In his own letters, he says that he didn't think that he would be sentenced to life in prison for his crimes.
You killed 4 people. You terminated a pregnancy early. You killed children that were under the age of 10. Like, you're not getting out, my dude. There's no way that this man is getting out. The only way he's getting out is in a cardboard box being shipped to a place for funeral purposes, and that is it. He's going to be getting out when he is buried.
He's even publicly discussed his plans once he leaves prison and firmly believes that one day he will be a free man and work in prison ministry. Now, from a legal perspective, you will be hard-pressed to find any competent legal professional who believes that he will ever leave his incarceration, especially when you weigh the mountain of evidence on top of his voluntary plea. But if you had told me in the early 2000s that Scott Peterson would be getting off of death row and potentially finagling a new trial, I would have laughed at you and said that that was completely absurd. In the full interview with H.G. Tudor, he explains that psychopaths are fueled by their need to manipulate and convince others of the authenticity of their actions. And Chris now knows that he needs to play the part of a grieving, remorseful, and genuine man who merely made a mistake and would never do that again. Skilled psychopaths are exceptional at their ability to convince their audience that they are not to be feared, the evidence of which was best demonstrated in the life and actions of the aforementioned Ted Bundy.
He didn't kill a stranger. He killed 3 blood-related people, babies, children, 1 that he loved dearly. So you're telling me that the 4 people that were the closest to him, that will ever be close to him, now he wants to be released to strangers? That sorry, makes no sense.
Because each and every woman he lured to his vehicle to ask for help with his car was likely convinced that he was a safe and harmless man. And I would venture to say that none of them had any earthly idea of the sickening horrors that man was truly capable of. And every time Chris Watts sheds a tear, all I hear is a monster trying to convince his audience to come take a look under the hood of his car.
And like there's some scripture and stuff that I read to him, so I just try to think back. Like I wish this never happened.
Why didn't you do it before?
It's like I wish that blinder wasn't on my head, right in my eyes. That would have seen what was going on. Like, I was having, everybody said, oh, you're just out there having fun while your kids, or kids and wife are on vacation. I'm just like, no, it wasn't like that, but it seemed like that's what it looked like when you're going, you're going to camping, going to drag race, going all the other stuff that you have fun doing, but you're with somebody else. It's not your family. It just didn't seem right. With her, it just didn't seem like I could even see that anymore. I was there at her house pretty much every night. So it was like I didn't have that time at home just to really think about anything.
During law enforcement's investigation of this case, they uncovered many suspicious Google searches that happened for both Chris and his mistress,
We don't see Chris's either. That's why I want to know what he was Googling.
Nicole Kessinger. But the search that stood out for me the most was when Chris Watts Googled, "What does it feel like when someone says I love you?" You couldn't ask for a better example of the inner workings of a psychopath's mind with that search alone. It so clearly demonstrates that he does not experience feelings in a way that is congruent with someone that has no underlying mental health disorders.
But yet he sits there and tells Nicole Kessinger, I love you, my sweet empanada.
Especially when you take into consideration that he claims to have loved Shanann. If that was the case, then why in the world doesn't he know how it feels when someone says I love you? But the more we peel back the layers of this case, the more evident his cold and calculated mindset will become.
Literally, I was only at home from when I got home from work. I worked out, I ate dinner, and then I went over to her house. I never slept in my house the whole month of July.
Now,
He's with Nicole.
When you said you went home and then you were at her house, was that while Shanann was gone? Oh, okay. So you weren't even at your house.
No.
This all happened so quickly, didn't it?
It was insane quickly. She even told me she was never in a normal relationship. She would never have somebody over at her house more than once or twice a week, but she felt like she wanted me over there. Yeah. She said she felt comfortable over there.
Yeah, because she's Googling butt stuff.
That's what was different. She wanted me over there. But
it's the best she ever had.
I just wish that all that would just go away. I just wish I'd I know it's hard. I know it's wrong to say I wish I'd never met somebody, but I wish I'd maybe met her at work and then just kept it that way.
Yeah, you should have.
Now, for me, this statement is one of the many examples pointing to Chris's clear lack of empathy. Now, in this moment, he seems more concerned about not making a statement that could potentially offend or hurt Nicole, which flies in the face of a man who understands the gravity of what he's done. His lack of emotional awareness is, to me, one of the many signs of Chris's dysfunction, that even though he has wrought devastation upon everyone in his and Shanann's family, he doesn't seem to understand how his comments defame the memory of Shanann, Cece, Bella, and Nico. And this is precisely why the American public watched in stunned disbelief during his interviews the day after Shanann and the girls were last seen.
Because he had no empathy.
Because he never once expressed a single moment of worry or concern.
He
smiled through most of his interview, and his words echoed with a hollow and disingenuous monotone that left onlookers confused, but primally aware that something wasn't right. And everything we suspected after watching those initial interviews could not compare to the horrors of what this monster actually did to his family. And no amount of self-reflection, jailhouse religion, or attempts at appearing penitent will ever bring back the precious lives that he stole.
So then on that night, was it just a new type of fight?
It was
Never had, or what? What happened?
Yeah, it was a totally different type of fight. It was,
The neighbors said that they fought all the time.
Just felt like, I don't know, it was more anger than anything else. Like there was emotion to it at first, and it just felt like it was just anger. It was just like, like there was no love there. It was kind of like what we were saying, what she was saying. It was just like, it's almost like we knew like something was combating at each other. We didn't know, like it wasn't ourselves.
Really? Anger from you or anger from her?
I think it was more anger from me and more like desperation from her to.
A vast majority of people who are familiar with this case are also familiar with the story that Chris Watts is telling right now.
Yep.
Originally, Chris told the media and law enforcement that he and Shanann had been in a heated argument that morning, which caused her to leave the house with the girls. But once Chris realized that his neighbor's camera
That's
and
when
the
he
evidence
screwed up.
proved that she and the girls never left, and then, of course, failing the polygraph, he then changed his story to the one that involved Shanann being responsible for the demise of his children.
Which he
But
blames on
eventually,
Tammy.
we would arrive at the version of the story where he was the one responsible for the homicides of his whole family. But what if I told you that this wasn't the full truth either?
I don't think we'll ever get it.
On April 23rd, 2019, Chris Watts sent a letter that contained his most complete and detailed confession to date.
Cadle.
In the weeks and months preceding that date, a woman named Sherilyn Cadle had reached out to Chris, a motherly figure that, for a time, became something of a confidant to him. They would eventually begin sharing dozens of letters, speaking on the phone multiple times a week, even going so far as to meet Chris in person at his prison in Wisconsin. But the letter he sent in April of 2019 to his new pen pal would graphically detail the events of that fateful day and reveal things that most people had previously never known, including the revelation that Chris Watts had been planning and daydreaming of ending the life of Shanann for a very long time. And when I read what he revealed in those letters, I was sickened and mortified, because anyone who is capable of that kind of cruelty is now and will always be an inhuman monster.
It should never be released.
She wanted to fix it. Yeah. She knew if something wasn't right. Like, like when the whole thing with my parents happened with my parents called it Nutgate.
What happened?
Nutgate.
What's that?
With the peanut.
Oh,
yeah. Or whatnot.
Oh, with her family?
Yeah.
Pistachio ice cream or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, somebody called it Nutgate.
I haven't heard that.
I haven't heard that either.
Yeah. I guess what people are calling it.
Okay.
But that was like another out. Like, maybe I could have just like stopped everything with Nikki and just kind of concentrated on helping like whatever happened there. Because like, Shanann had a story, my mom had a story. Like, whatever happened, I probably asked my 10-year-old nephew. Probably can tell me what actually happened.
Well, and they both have their feelings for good reasons, and they both didn't see it the other person's way. And
Yeah, and like maybe I didn't talk to my parents from then on until like August 6th. And like, my dad took that whole week off.
You didn't talk to your parents from then on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because like Shanann was like, do not talk to them, do not call them, do not do anything.
Is that what she said?
Yeah, and
The relationship between Shanann and Chris's parents was marred by a long history of disagreements and animosity. And the circumstances that surrounded the infamous Nutgate argument would create a deeper divide between the two that created considerable spillover, forcing Chris to choose between his wife and his parents. Chris Watts was socially awkward in his adolescence.
Wife, to be honest.
We heard his mother, Cindy, describe his interpersonal difficulties during his formidable years. Chris had only ever had one short relationship prior to meeting Shanann, who herself had already suffered a painful divorce of her own by that time. But the conflict between Shanann and Cindy Watts was something with roots that predated their argument over food allergies. A wound that, when seen through the crystal clear eyeglasses of hindsight, would reveal a divide that had begun long before that day.
Amen.
And they got married in 2012. Did they get married in North Carolina?
They did.
They didn't attend.
How was that?
We didn't attend.
Really?
We didn't attend because Shanann and I just couldn't get along.
Get over it.
Just for a moment, try to imagine the impact that it would have on your marriage that on the day of your wedding, your own parents choose not to show up and participate simply because your mother doesn't get along with your spouse.
I think that's wrong.
Now, I want to state this publicly right here and now. I do not advocate for anyone to attack any person involved in this case, publicly, privately, or otherwise.
And I agree with that. As much as I do not like Cindy as the person she is and how she was towards Shanann, I don't want any hate or negativity or any destruction to come to Cindy. She's not part of this case. As part that we've talked about is what Chris was grown up through. Again, my intent is to find the truth through Nicole being interrogated. But then Chris, the reason why we looked into Cindy is because there was that upbringing that caused Chris to be the way he is, and how she was so negative towards Shanann, and she kept doing this peanut allergy. And I was trying to clear the air with when it came to that whole Cindy and Ronnie and Chris and Shanann. So that's why you don't see a lot of me doing Cindy. I did like, 2 or 3 videos on it, and I haven't done anything more. A majority of my videos are in Chris and Nicole. So again, I agree with Behind Criminal Minds and what he states, that we do not want any hate, even towards Nicole Kessinger. I don't want her to be hurt. I don't want her to be, how do you say it? I don't want anything negative to happen to Nicole Kessinger. I just want her to be brought to justice. I want her to be interrogated properly through the actual judicial system. The crime to be looked at properly, and to be charged if she was an accessory or if she had any connection with it. But we can't know that until they actually do it. So I'm making that very clear, as what Behind Criminal Minds has stated as well.
Attacking either family does nothing to bring back Shanann and her beautiful children. Advocating for their memory is how we stand for justice.
Agreed.
I take issue with what has gone on in recent months here on YouTube. Several weeks ago, Ronnie and Cindy Watts were interviewed, stating to the world that they don't believe that Chris even committed this crime.
Which I thought was wrong.
Their refusal to accept the fact that regardless of outside influences or thrive patches, their son is responsible for these crimes, and refusing to acknowledge that fact only continues to encourage the countless people who have continued to attack the family of Shanann. The Rooschecks have endured enough at the hands of
Amen.
Chris Watts, let alone the entire community of people still attacking them right here on YouTube for standing up for the memory of Shanann. And to me,
and I will never say for you guys that are watching to go attack Cindy, to go attack Ronnie, to attack Nicole Kessinger. We might despise and loathe and share discuss, but nowhere have I've ever stated or will state of the attack onto those families. They could be wrong. I'm not saying they could be wrong, but they could be definitely having some issues. But again, I or him or other YouTubers that I've put on my YouTube channel have no desire or any promotion for anybody to email, call, physically attack, anything in that matter. Okay? I'm making that very clear.
that is truly monstrous.
So when did it turn?
As far as that conversation, it's at the end when I was telling her, like, I told her I didn't love her anymore. That's when it happened.
What happened?
She told me to get off her, and then I put my hands on it.
Okay.
Did you say she said something like that you were hurting the baby or something?
That was before that, because like when I was straddling her, it was kind of like around her waist type deal.
Why did you get on her like that?
I just when we got on the bed, that's just what I got on.
Is that so she would listen to you?
I felt like she could probably listen to me just laying beside her, but I got on top of her. And every time I think about it, I'm just like, did I know I was going to do that before I got on top of it? I don't know.
Really? That's an interesting thought, Chris. You don't know if you knew.
The words Chris Watts just spoke are a complete and total lie. But before I continue, I want to issue a trigger warning. Going forward, I will be discussing the details of what Chris confessed to in his letters. Viewer discretion is advised.
You have been warned.
Now, with what Chris just said, he is clearly making a claim that this was done in the heat of the moment.
No.
Something that his many supporters still claim was the byproduct of a likely temporary psychosis. He clearly wants the officers to believe that he didn't know what he was doing, that this was all an abrupt and unexpected decision that he couldn't control, and he deeply regrets it. But there's just one very serious problem with that claim. In the weeks following his arrest, this note card was located in Chris's handwriting, dated a week before his vicious crimes.
Which was very weird.
It reads, "To whom it may concern, if anyone gets this letter, I would never do anything to hurt myself or my children or my wife. If anything happens to me, please investigate my wife. Signed, Chris Watts."
He was planning
dated
it.
August 6th, 2018, exactly 1 week before he ended the lives of his entire family. And in the docuseries called Cellmate Secrets,
Very
Chris's
good.
pen pal Sherilyn described her conversations with Chris, including a discussion they had concerning his relationship with Shanann. In the episode, Sherilyn explains that Chris did not snap, that he
Premeditated.
planned his crimes because of his obsession with Nicole.
He was
And he would just
obsessed.
stand there and daydream about what it would be like to end Shanann's life. Chris also said that whenever they would get into an argument or have a disagreement, he wouldn't fight back, but he would just stand there and daydream about what it would be like to end her life.
That's sick.
But if that isn't enough, Chris's letter to Sherilyn from April 23rd of 2019 discusses the events that occurred the day before his crimes on the 12th of August. August 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, "That's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen, and I did nothing to stop it." In that
See, what leaves me to believe when he states that this is the last time that, I mean, it could be just a viewer's discretion, like I'm interpreting with what I'm reading, is when he put the children to bed, that was the last time he was going to do so, and he couldn't, he didn't stop it because he didn't want to, because he wanted to restart a life with Nicole. So he didn't stop Nicole from what she did to the girls. Again, for educational purposes, that is where my thoughts are. I could be totally wrong. I mean, like I said before, I don't know 100% certainty about being a criminal justice person or a professional, but in my eyes, what my thoughts and my theories is that Nicole was the one that took care of the children, because again, like we've said before, there's 38 minutes of uninterrupted time that Chris had to dig a hole, murder his two girls, clean up the situation, and all that before his buddies came out to the Survey 319. 38 minutes. There's no way that he dug that hole and that fast, dragged Shanann there by himself, dead weight of more than 140 pounds, while his daughters were sitting inside the truck. He murdered them, which he stated it took about 10 minutes apiece to smother them and put them in the oil tanks. That's 20 minutes in itself. So you're telling me 18 minutes he had to dispose of Shanann by digging a hole, shallow grave, and then putting her there, covering it up, not being sweaty, having to change clothes. Do you see what I'm getting at? That's why we believe that Chris was not alone. We felt like he had help. And then there's those rumors that are going around that possibly Jim was involved, which I don't think Jim was involved. But again, we don't even know if Jim is real because we don't really have evidence of Jim. Nicole stated, "Leave Jim alone." So they left Jim alone. They left Nicole alone. They literally just talked about like her story with Chris, and that was it. Like none of it made sense. None of it helped the investigation. And with my live tonight, I'm going to state why Chris dodged the death penalty. The DA even spouts off that her deleting of messages hindered the investigation, which hindering an investigation is a federal crime. Lying to a detective or a police officer, whatever have you, that is a federal crime. They were CBI agents, FBI agents. If you lie to a federal officer, it is a federal crime. 1 to 3 years you can get. Just for that. The deletion of messages, 1 to 15 years. I'm telling you, man.
Same docuseries, Sherilyn recalled a conversation she had with Chris where she explained to him that the general public considered him to be a monster. He immediately recoiled at that and explained to her that he hated being called that because he didn't believe that he was a monster. But a man who could premeditate a crime of this magnitude deserves to carry that moniker to his grave because Chris Watts is a monster, and no amount of manipulation, blame shifting, or lies will ever change that.
Just like everything that happened that morning, I don't know, like I try to go back in my head. I'm just like, I didn't want to do this, but I did it. Everything just kind of like.
Felt like you had to?
So he has no self-control?
I just felt like it was. I don't even want to say it felt like I had to. It just felt like there was already something in my mind that was implanted that I was going to do it, and I woke up that morning and it was going to happen, and I had no control of it.
You never thought about it before?
It was just like, I don't want, like in the sentencing hearing, that prosecutor said it takes 2 to 4 minutes for something like that to happen. Like, why can't I just let go?
Because you wanted it.
I just let
Was
go.
it feeling like it was in motion and you just couldn't stop it?
Yeah, it was just like, I don't even want to know what she saw when she looked back at me.
A monster?
Did you look at her? What was she doing?
I think that's wrong.
Why do you think she wasn't fighting?
You can't tell me she didn't fight.
Maybe she was praying. Maybe she was just. I read the Bible. It said, the scripture says, don't forgive these people, for they do not know what they do.
What Chris is doing in this moment is simply appalling to me. And it reminds me of H.G. Tudor's descriptions of how psychopaths manipulate their subjects. And in my decades of experience in the legal profession, I worked with inmates regularly, and I am no stranger to the wide variety of personalities and mental disorders that run rampant throughout the entirety of the prison industrial complex. And it is my opinion that the attempt at seeming sorrowful in this moment is only another manipulation from a man who continually demonstrates signs of psychopathy. And in just a moment, we will delve further into the rest of the letter that Chris wrote.
How much more,
in April
man? Holy cow.
And fully uncover exactly why I believe Chris Watts demonstrates the traits of a psychopath. Because anyone capable of the acts that he admits to doing in that letter is someone who does not share the same tenets of right and wrong as he claims to have. And if you've ever watched the trial of Ted Bundy and listened to the judge who sentenced him, it becomes crystal clear just how proficient and talented these men are at hiding in plain sight, while simultaneously convincing you that they are not to be feared. But the most disingenuous part of Chris's comments is the fact that he doesn't seem to know what or who he is even quoting from the Bible. Of course, Chris would later admit that he never bothered to read the Bible until arriving in prison, which is likely why he has no earthly...
Because you don't have much to do in prison. You have to look out the window, work out, clean your area, and read certain books and the Bible. That's all you have to do, and write letters. You're not well, some people are watching TV, but I don't think he's getting that luxury, but
the idea what he is even saying, because the person that spoke those words was Christ, a good and blameless man who was being put to death for a crime he did not commit. Amen. What a truly disgusting irony.
Maybe she was saying that. I don't know what she was saying in her head, but she, like when you guys told me, take off your shirt and check for defensive wounds, and there wasn't going to be any. She didn't fight. I don't know Why?
Like she didn't grab. Could she grab your arms, or were her arms pinned down, or?
Not that I remember. I don't think so. I mean,
You can't tell me that when she was being like this, she wasn't like doing like this or like. You can't tell me that woman did not fight. That woman was a fighter from birth till when she passed. She was determined in everything. She fought for what she wanted. And you're telling me that she just let it happen? No way. No way.
I don't think like I moved to where my knees were around her arms or anything. But it was just kind of like when I got on top of her, we started talking. That was it. It's kind of like in my head, or like in the back of my head, that was going to happen. And just like at the end of the conversation, it was just like, that's what happened.
Can't they do like the photographing like you see on CSI? Like, you know how you get like choked or whatever, like this or whatever, and you push, and then when they take the picture, they can like see the like indentations. Like, can we see if it's an actual hand grab or a chokehold, or like, can we see that?
I just wish I could have let go.
He wanted to be with
Did it seem
Nicole.
like it was that long? 2 to 4 minutes? How long did it seem for you?
Almost kind of felt like it was
Forever.
Longer almost, because it felt like time was standing still. It's kind of like I just saw my life just disappearing before my eyes, but I just like I couldn't let go. It was like somebody else, like if you picture somebody else around you, holding your hands, holding you, keep you from not.
Which is
not
an
letting go.
excuse.
The relationship of Chris Watts and his family had reached a boiling point in the days preceding his crimes. Shanann was angry and insisting that Chris understand the weight of his mother's careless actions towards their children. And Chris was again caught between warring factions within his family that simply couldn't seem to get along. The impact of his mother's disdain for Shanann likely deeply affected Chris throughout the entirety of their marriage. But in this situation, instead of simply divorcing Shanann and walking away, he premeditated something that would leave stains on his hands that he will never be able to wash clean. The animosity between his mother and Shanann does not excuse or absolve Chris's behavior in the slightest, but it does help to shed light on the atmosphere that precluded this vicious event. But even with the modest segments of history we have of this dysfunctional past, it only serves to make Cindy Watts' interview even more disturbing. Because it's important to remember that Cindy conducted this interview after her son had already confessed to this crime. Now, since the interview, she contends that her words were simply twisted and made to be something they weren't. But why don't you judge that for yourself?
When and where did he meet Shanann?
They met, and he liked her, she liked him, but it didn't, I don't think that was love at first sight or anything.
That's not what Chris said.
They took a little while and I guess got to know each other and, dated. It was always a little strange that she always said a lot of things about Chris in front of me that I didn't like.
Bad about her.
Like, this isn't the kind of person I would date. He doesn't know how to do this, or he doesn't know how to do that. He looks like a skater boy. Look at his hair. Look how much stuff he puts on his hair. It was just on and on and on, and I just got a bad feeling.
It's very easy to forget that her comments were made mere months after this woman's son brutally ended the lives of her daughter-in-law and all 3 of her grandchildren. It's almost like she doesn't understand that she's allowed to love Chris, but that doesn't excuse her refusal to hold him.
See, that's a good analogy and a good way to put it. She's allowed to love her son, but it does not excuse what he did to her and the kids. Great way to put it. Behind Criminal Minds.
Him accountable. This entire interview resulted in such a vicious backlash that Chris's parents would avoid the media for some time after it. And to this day, Cindy doesn't seem to believe that she said or did anything deserving of criticism. It's almost like this kind of emotionally unaware behavior may have been a significant lack of control environment that resulted in one of the most horrific crimes of our time.
Amen.
At some point there was a statement about rage. Do you feel like you were in a rage at that point?
That's the only way I can describe it, honestly.
But why was he mad at her?
Like a snap. Something. I mean, I know. I guess my attorney had said like some, strangulation is more of like a, I don't know, passionate type thing. I'm just like, I don't know how that can be passionate.
It's just intimate because you're right in there, using your own hands. It's a lot different than someone standing across the room and you shooting them or something like that. So
It just felt like somebody was like behind me, just like, I just couldn't let go.
It was him that was the problem.
Because there was a lot of things in your life that were like that, right? Where you're just like, maybe felt out of control, or maybe felt like, I don't know why I couldn't take a step back, or,
A very common theme throughout the entire criminal justice system among these types of offenders is their inability to stop their urges. The urges that lead to the crimes for which they are known, which is another considerable and unfortunate hallmark of psychopathy. But it's important to know that a mental health disorder does not excuse anyone for their behavior. It simply provides a foundation for us to try and stop this cycle from continuing to happen. Many years ago, I met with a middle-aged inmate who, at that point, had only ever been kind, generous, and helpful in all of our interactions. I was helping with other offenders and preparing them for their transition back into the real world, and he was a TA in my class. It was then that he sat with me and told me more of his story. It was a story of pain, of an uncontrolled urge to commit a crime that took more than just his victim's life. Over the years, he had received mental health treatment through a program that most offenders will never receive, largely due to the decreased funding for these programs throughout the entirety of the correctional system. But his treatment had allowed him to learn his triggers, how to cope with his urges, and even made significant inroads with the victim's family in an attempt to make amends. But even after all of that, he looked at me and told me that he never wanted to leave. Not because he didn't believe that he could succeed, but for him, he would always worry about the possibility of what he could do.
He didn't want
30 years after his crime, and he was still stifled by the belief that he was broken. Now, I don't believe every inmate is hopeless, but when you survey the mental health problems of this nation, it leaves one wondering when the next Chris Watts will rear their ugly head.
Which is scary.
And it's for that reason that I speak candidly about these cases. Because if we have any hope to alter our trajectory, we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to protect our loved ones and change it.
like even when you said, when your buddy was like, let's go to the football game, you wanted to say yes, he's
Yeah, I wanted to. Like, I haven't been to a football game since North Carolina, so I was just like, yeah, sure. Like, I wanted to say that.
Yeah.
I wanted to just text him, hey, it was here, fell through, can't. Let's go.
So, then what?
Just,
But you don't hear a care in his voice at all.
just after, Shanann was, once she was gone, I was just like, I didn't know what was going on. It's like, it was like a traumatic, I don't know what you call it, traumatic event type, and everything, and like, I was shaking, I didn't know what had happened.
He knew.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I had done. I still wasn't in that right state of mind. I don't think like I was in control of what I could think or what I could do at that point in time. Like most people say, like, why don't you just call 911? Why don't you, like, unless you're in that situation, you don't know. You don't know what you would have done. It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback.
Chris, you have got to be kidding me. Okay, let's recap what he just said. He's telling us that he snapped, in control of his own actions or behaviors, that some evil entity was standing behind him, took control of his
It was
free
him.
will and prevented him from doing any of the right things in that moment. And no one should judge because we couldn't possibly know how we would respond in that moment. And I can't help but marvel at this kind of self-righteous attempt at garnering empathy while completely deflecting responsibility. And allow me to explain why. This is the letter that Chris Watts wrote just 2 months after the updated confession he's giving to law enforcement right now. And allow me to read you the words of Chris Watts himself concerning what actually happened that night. I cannot stress this enough. This will be hard to hear. I couldn't stop myself from what I knew would occur the next morning. August 13th, morning of. I went to the girls' room first, before Shanann and I had our argument. I went to Bella's room, then to Cece's room, and used a pillow from their bed. Dear God. After I left Cece's room, then I climbed back in bed with Shanann and our argument ensued. After Shanann passed, Bella and Cece woke back up. I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. It makes the act that much worse, knowing I still took their lives at the location. The reason the medical examiner found oxy in Shanann's system is because I gave it to her. I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shanann wasn't pregnant. These are the words of Chris Watts, a man who wants to leave prison.
Exactly.
And as a father of 3 girls, I cannot use words to describe just how hard it was to read the coldness of these words. And they are not even close to being the worst things he's admitted to in his letters. And anyone who is capable of recounting details of this scale with such cold apathy is someone who should never leave the confines of that prison. Ever. Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico deserved so much better than this. And I will continue to advocate for their family and the memory of these beautiful people. Because despite all of the pain that Chris Watts has caused, he cannot steal their memory, and we will never forget them. In the years since Chris's sentencing, the Ruszczyk family has rightly been assigned as the executors of the estate of Shanann Watts.
Good.
Life insurance policies equaling 400.
Which I do want to reiterate that the Watts tried getting that insurance money.
$150,000 were taken out by Chris, which, given the legal standing of the Ruszczyk family, would entitle them to those funds. But Ronnie and Cindy Watts apparently disagreed, and they submitted an insurance claim so that they would be the recipients of the nearly $500,000 life.
That your son decided to murder. I don't even think the Ruszczyks cared about the money. They would rather have their daughter back. Frankie would rather have his sister back. They didn't care about the money.
Insurance payout. Now, it might seem rather unimaginable that people who financially support Chris Watts while he sits in prison would then request the money from a claim arising from his crimes.
Exactly.
But that's what happened.
But we're the wrong ones.
But don't worry. It gets worse.
We're the ones that are wrongly accusing Cindy and Ronnie because they're parents that are suffering too, yet they're the ones that are actually trying to go after the money. The Ruszczyks probably... they went after, or they didn't go after, but they were rightfully assigned the estate of Shanann Watts. She's not here anymore. It doesn't go to Chris. It doesn't go to Cindy. It doesn't go to Ronnie. The only connection that you had with Shanann was the grandbabies, and those grandbabies are gone. So you have no right in getting that estate. How dare they even think that they could get that money? That money should rightfully go, where it thankfully it did, to the Ruszczyks.
The Watts were apparently undeterred by public opinion, so they hired lawyers and took their claim to court. And according to court records, the families have settled, and the details of that settlement remain sealed. In my legal career, I helped to write the language of hundreds of those kinds of settlement agreements, and I can tell you this. I never once drafted a settlement agreement between two parties of an interpleader insurance claim that was settled before trial that didn't involve a mutual payout to both parties. I cannot
Sickening.
definitively tell you what happened in this case, but I would bet my oceanfront property in Arizona that the parents of Chris Watts received a chunk of those life insurance funds in that settlement agreement. And if that truly happened, then a man who ended the life of his entire family will profit from his crimes.
That's sickening.
And this is just one of the many reasons I report on these cases. But I have one final note concerning this matter. Being angry, hurt, upset, these are all normal feelings, but no one deserves to be harassed or maligned on the internet. It will do nothing to bring back the victims of this crime.
True.
Instead, focus your energies on seeking justice every opportunity you get and advocate for the memory of these beautiful people. Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico Watts. We will not forget you. Now, in closing today, I want to take a moment to say thank you to each of you. We recently passed 10,000 subscribers, and I could not be more grateful to each of you.
134K now.
It's not every day that someone is given the chance to do something that they really love, and to also find the support of an incredible community along the way. It wasn't that long ago that I had underwent my third spine surgery, losing my whole career and barely avoiding homelessness because of it. Now, I don't share those details looking for sympathy. On the contrary, I say them because I'm grateful for every day that I get to do something that I really love. And if you haven't figured it out by now, I love to tell stories.
Right, he's good at it.
It started years ago in my children's bedroom. Each night when I would tuck them in, they would ask me to tell them a new story every single night. And watching their eyes light up as I told them about the brave penguin who fared the dangerous seas, or the lost polar bear who found his way home, I fell in love with crafting narratives because it made my daughters smile. So thank you. It might seem trivial, but I really love doing this. And I can only do it because of you. Now, if you enjoyed today's content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Most people don't fully realize how helpful those things are to a growing channel like ours. So thank you for your support in advance, because without each of you, none of this is possible. I also want to thank our new and existing Patreon and YouTube supporters. Your willingness to support this content helps to ensure that it continues for years to come. And a special thank you to the BCM research team and to our Patreon producers for this episode. The BCM community is growing week after week, and that is something that motivates me every single day. And if you would like to support the channel, please consider visiting our Patreon or support us right here on YouTube with the subscription options available right here on our channel. And stay tuned for new episodes covering Scott Peterson, Sarah Boone, Daryl Brooks, Charles Cullen, as well as new installments for the Jodi Arias and Casey Anthony series coming soon. I hope each of you have a beautiful Thanksgiving, enjoy your family, and thank you for joining me here today. This has been Behind Criminal Minds. We'll see you next time.
Another great one. So again, I don't mean to get emotional. It just, his words speak volumes, because this channel, his channel would not be what it is without you guys. And I do this for something because I enjoy it. I love it. I've been in dark places before. And I wanted to, initially, when I first started the YouTube channel, my focus was to get 100,000 subscribers, which it is still to this day. But the main focus of my channel was to the person that's watching, you guys at home, is to get away from the stress, the bills, the heartache, the medical conditions, the whatever you are going on in your life. You can forget about that. Come to my channel, enjoy paranormal, enjoy the crime, enjoy gaming and toys and tech, and just being a nerd at everything you love. And I just wanted that escape for those people, and I felt like I've brought a lot of people together in a loving community, which is that of Zawoki, Zulki's not just one person, it's all of us. And for those that sit there and will hate and stuff like that, it doesn't bother me anymore. But just understand it's not about the money. It's about, one, the laughs, the loves, and the community that we've built together. But it's also about finding the truth, finding the right answers, finding the justice, or fight like paranormal, finding out if there is spiritual aspects to the realms of being deceased. If we do see our loved ones, if we don't see our loved ones, gaming community. I mean, if we could just game and release with one another. I've met so many great people to play with games. I mean, I would have never met if I didn't make this YouTube channel. And then it came into the crime aspect. And I've watched how many videos on First 48 and all these other YouTube channels. I'm like, you know what? Somebody needs to speak on a lot of these channels, because these cases sometimes go quiet, and these people that have died should not be deceased, and they deserve retribution, or not retribution, but an advocator to talk about these cases. And that's why I feel like I can't let this case go, is because I know in my heart and soul, I can't say that it's personally Shanann, but I feel like somebody's talking to me saying, don't give up. There's something about this case. And again, I can't say what it is, who it is, but they're literally telling me that there's more to this case. Don't give up. Maybe it's the people that I'm watching, or that are watching right now. But and for those that have picked fun at a man crying, I'm sorry. I have no control over it. I'm an emotional person. I have been for pretty much all my life. I see a child or an animal, or I know when something upsets me and I'm going to cry about it. I'm sorry. So, but again, Edward at Behind Chroma Minds does a beautiful job. I think I almost cry every single time this man makes a video at the end, because it's just so beautifully done. So, definitely go over to his channel, give some love. I didn't realize that a year ago he was at 100 or 10,000 subscribers, so it can be done. It can be possible. For those that have no faith in my channel, which is very unfortunate, because I'm very driven, and again, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have the determination. You guys are what drives me to do these videos. You guys are the ones that make me keep going. Like I've said, I've been in dark places before, and I do have family and friends, but the amount of community that I have here now, you guys give me the utmost strength that I've ever had before. And I commend every single one of you that support me, that are there talking in the chats, the comments, the likes, the subscribes. I thank you so very much. You have no idea. And we'll see you guys in the next video. So please take care, be safe, and as always, keep nerding on. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.